The future of church security will not be defined by how we respond to incidents, but how we prevent them. The title of today's episode is The Future of Church Security, a Leadership Blueprint for Prevention and Preparedness. Today's conversation is about leadership, awareness, and the responsibility we all share in protecting our communities. I want to welcome you to the Faith Secure podcast, where we are watchful, prayerful, and prepared. I'm Dr. Michael Brown, and throughout this season, we've explored physical security, cybersecurity, emergency management, and leadership responsibility. Today, we bring those conversations together with a focus on prevention. Our guest is Ms. Catherine Schweit, JD, former senior FBI official who led the Bureau's active shooter initiative and author of Stop the Killing: How to End the Mass Shooting Crisis. Ms. Schweit is nationally known for helping organizations understand how violence develops and, more importantly, how it can be prevented. Welcome to the podcast, ma'am.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here. I hope I can provide some information that will be helpful. I want everybody to take away something that will be useful for them.
Oh, I'm sure you are. I have no doubt. Let's dive right in. The first segment, we're going to talk about the future of violence prevention. So the opening question I have for you, Ms. Schweit, as you look at the current landscape, what must leaders understand about the future of violence prevention?
I think the most important thing from a leadership standpoint, and I, as a leader at the FBI, is to face it straight on. I think the denial is a very difficult way to start to be secure. And I see denial a lot in that it's the view that from a leadership standpoint, especially, in the faith community, I work in the faith community a lot, and they say, this really, our mission is nonviolence. Our mission is faith. Our mission is, but I say your mission is also to protect your flock.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how has the understanding of targeted violence evolved?
Well, I think it's changed quite a bit because we had pockets of individuals who understood it. Our behavioral experts at Quantico, the Secret Service, they had their information. Law enforcement had their information. The federal agencies like the FBI, we had our information. I think now prevention and threat assessment and how we assess the particular type of violence that we're most concerned about, targeted violence. I think we have a much more, not only national view about it, but a much more global view. And it helps us to better understand what are the best prevention methods, what are the best efforts that we can take. And fortunately, because of incidents, we also have developed a lot of best practices.
Okay. So having said that, what are faith-based organizations still getting wrong about this?
I think what I see routinely when I work with an organization, whether it's whatever level of faith-based, is an idea that we'll assign someone who's a volunteer, some member of our parish or some member of our community to this, and then they'll take care of it. I think that's the biggest mistake that I see, is a lack of full-born engagement, including from the very top leadership.
Okay. So now, if leaders could change one mindset about prevention today, what would that be in your estimation?
I would like to see leadership be comfortable in their own skin, as comfortable as they are about talking about their faith. They also need to talk about how to take care of their flock. And I don't see that. So because I don't see that, they don't really have a comfort level even when they are talking about it. It's security is a scary word, and it's something that just goes by the wayside instead of just being part of the conversation. And I'll just give you a simple example.
Oh, by all means.
When I remember when I started working with the FBI many years ago, I would go to briefings and I would go to places, and routinely where there was a good organized security, you'd go into training or a briefing or something like that. Mm-hmm. And before they start, they say, okay, before we start, let's make it clear. The bathrooms are down the hallway, the second door on the left. Please look around and notice where the exits are in case of an emergency. It's such a simple thing to do, but I rarely see that done.
Wow. Okay. So now, in building a culture of awareness, which I think is where we're starting to pivot to, in your work, you emphasize that prevention is a community effort.
So
What
much.
does a culture of awareness look like in a church or faith-based organization?
I think that ideally, and I realize that every community has to grow to this, but I think
Mhm.
ideally it has to be that everyone owns the security. It-
Amen. Thank
right?
you. Yes.
And if you think about it like from a family standpoint, in your family unit, whatever your family is, um, you count on everybody to lock the doors at night and
Hmm.
close the windows when it rains. And
Yes.
when you're driving with your family in the car and it starts to rain, everybody who's sitting by a window needs to put the window up. It's everybody's responsibility.
And I'll tell you, Ms. Schweik, that's good that you mentioned that, because when I assist churches, I tell them all the time, everyone has a role to play in the security of the church. Everyone.
But
So,
people don't know what that is unless you talk about it.
and that's where we come in. So yes, absolutely. So now, it, in this scenario, how do you encourage people to speak up and get more involved?
I think that what I'd love to see is and particularly in a faith-based community,
Hmm.
is a group of people where we don't just rely on the guy who used to be a police officer who's part of our parish or
Yes.
part of our faith community or part of the temple, whatever, right?
Hmm.
I think it more instead needs to be just like we have that summer potluck every year and
Yes.
that church picnic, and it
Hmm.
takes a big community of people to do that, and everybody joins in, and you led this church picnic last year, can you do it again this year? You need to have a group of people
Hmm.
who are responsible for security
Right.
in not just the sanctuary, right, but in all of the places, at the front doors, in where the kids might go during service or during school or for preschool classes, church Bible
Right.
camp, all of that, the entire environment of your faith community, even including if you have a bus or transportation, you have to
Hmm.
include all of that. And you can't do that by asking one person who has a real job already
Exactly.
to do
Yes.
it on Saturday nights, or Saturday afternoons if they have a few minutes.
Right. So you're talking there needs to be systems in place. So now how can, as you mentioned earlier, when security is mentioned, there's certain apprehension about it, particularly in the faith-based community. How can leaders reduce the fear or demystify the concept of security?
That's a great question. That is a great question, because I think that every person watching this or listening who is in a leadership role, this is probably the last topic they want to talk about.
Hmm.
But I think that it's the most important one to just be comfortable starting a conversation with. And I
Right.
always suggest that instead of saying, "Hi, this is the security committee, and we're going to get together and we're going to talk about how we're going to divvy up security responsibilities for our buildings and our people and our environment." Instead of that, I say, "Hey, how about if you say, let's invite anybody who wants to come on Tuesday night to
Hmm.
just simply talk about what their concerns are
Right. Right.
about
Okay.
security, so we can see what the concerns are." Because somebody might come in and say, I see the kids playing on the playground before school and or before the church services, and that really makes me nervous. So you want to know what are the concerns of the people who are part of your community first, and
Hmm.
that's, I think, where you should start. Because then if somebody says, "I'm interested in taking care of the kitchen area, I'm
Right.
interested in you don't want somebody who really wants to bake a pie to be assigned to make the stew, right?
Okay. Right.
I'm just
This is
saying, as a
this is
long
true.
time, I'm from a family of 10,
Okay.
I'm at the
Okay.
bottom. I always did whatever I was told. And oftentimes I was peeling the apples and the
Uh-huh.
potatoes
Right.
when I would
Right.
have rather been making the stew. but
Okay.
you do the job you're assigned. So if people are going to particularly do a job that's voluntary, then just like we have people who, polish the chalices or,
Right.
mow the lawn, you have to have people who are invested and interested in security to some extent. And if you haven't asked who might want to be involved in it, you don't really know.
That's true. That's a very good point. Now we're going to pivot and talk about leadership, responsibility, and prevention. Okay. So now I want to talk about the pastor's role and what responsibility do they have when it comes to preventing violence?
Well, I'm going to kind of flip this around and say this. So that's a great question. What responsibility they have, right, is what you're saying.
Yes.
What I'm going to say is I've been on the other side of the table.
Okay.
I have been on the other side of the table where what I know is that if, God, hoping God willing, nobody has ever had a shooting in their community. But if they have, the responsibility that the pastor will feel for the failure, because that's what the pastor will feel. And I say that as a person who have spoken. I have spoken to so many people in my book, Stop the Killing, How to End the Mass Shooting Crisis. The foreword is written by Frank DeAngelis. He was the principal of Columbine High School when the shooting occurred.
I knew that name sounded familiar. Okay.
Yeah. And Frank felt such a sense of responsibility and a failure that he wasn't able to somehow prevent that, even though, he couldn't physically, have been responsible for everything. But he felt that sense of failure and responsibility to this point. The shooting occurred in 99. He stayed as the principal of the high school until every student who was in school in the entire district had finished their years. So he stayed until the kindergartners had finished. He wanted to be a stable voice and force and to let every child who ended up coming to Columbine High School appreciate.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I say this when you say, well, what's the role the pastor has and what are they? I'm just saying it's a forced responsibility. You take on this tremendous obligation and responsibility because you've got a calling, and that takes you to some sad places like people's homes when somebody dies and at the scene of a violent act out on the street, and you're there or in the hospital. This is another situation where you will feel such a sense of responsibility if something happens. So you want for nothing to ever happen. And the best way to do that is to have that connection with your whole community.
Oh, that was very interesting, Ms. Schweik. Okay, let me ask you this. So as a leader, how do you balance faith and preparedness? How do you balance that?
I think that my view about security is something you prepare for, not because you're afraid it's going to happen. Security is something you prepare for if it happens.
Yes.
And we don't have any problem in general balancing faith and preparedness with tornado watches and fire alarm, concerns. And if you have a community that has a facility that includes a school, let me suggest to you this. The last time we lost a child to a school fire was in the 1950s in Chicago. But we still run fire drills. Why? Because preparedness has become part of our lifestyle so that we can save more lives.
Right.
We used to, the largest loss of life in the United States for children for years was automobile accidents.
Okay.
How did that number go down progressively over the last 30 years? We added bigger bumpers. We added airbags. We put children in car seats. We reversed car seats for infants. All the testing that we did to say, hey, this will make the car safer for kids. And now you know what's the leading cause of death for children ages 1 to 19? Firearms.
What's that? Wow.
Firearms.
Wow.
So automobiles, not so much. Firearms.
Yes.
And half of the firearms deaths, not even half, 60% of the firearms deaths in the United States are suicide related. Unsecured guns.
I didn't know it was that high. I knew it was high. I didn't know 60%. It was that high.
And in fact, just one more little stat about firearms in the United States. When we think about the scary school shootings or the scary church shootings, about 90 people a year have died in those over the last 5 years on average, which is not a small number of bodies, right? It's a lot of people, 90 people. But every year, about 500 people, generally children, die when an unsecured gun is found and accidentally is discharged.
Wow.
So I think it's a question of being prepared, being responsible, but also as a leader, you have to know the facts that you can relay to your group community, whoever you're talking to say, this is why this is important. Locked doors are important because I think locked doors are and locks on doors are the most important and effective way to prevent violence from occurring in your facility. It may not seem like it. And I grew up with churches. I grew up in the Catholic Church, and I would walk over to the Catholic Church anytime I was feeling blue, open the door and go sit in the pews. And that was so much wonderful solace to me. And we want to have a community like that, but we have to balance it. You have to balance it.
Absolutely. And that's one of the main things I tell churches. You always start with access control. That's the main thing. If you control access, you can control some of the other things that can take place.
True.
So let me ask you this, since you're a former FBI, how should churches partner with law enforcement?
I think if you haven't had a law enforcement officer come to see your facility, you're missing an opportunity. I think you should stop, wave by the first car that goes by and wave them by and offer them coffee and ask him or her to come on in and take a look around and see how would you come here? How do you think this facility is safe? Because here's something that I think it is so easy to forget. As an FBI agent, I would respond to someplace. When I respond to a bank robbery, for example, a simple bank robbery, it's the first time it's likely that I'm ever walking into that bank. Right. I don't know where the manager's office is. I don't know where people are congregating. I don't know where people could have hidden. And I don't know where people might hide who could hurt me. I don't know. In churches, around, think of how beautiful and the variety of the churches that are in the United States. I spent Easter Mass at the National Cathedral which was really beautiful in downtown Washington, D.C.
Yes, absolutely.
4,000 people. The security was extraordinary, but it was almost, you had to look for it to know it was there. But it was well managed. They took care of. So law enforcement, is an opportunity to bring a set of eyes to the table that you wouldn't otherwise have, and give them an opportunity to see what is inside the walls and where they can go and how they can get in and what doors might be locked or unlocked and what your chances are, to protect your person, your flock, whoever happens to be there for what type of activity, whether it's a regular church service or, a meeting after church or something like that, or something with the youth group. Where do they go? Who would know? My kids grew up in a church, in an area with a church that had, big basement, and you would never know it unless you knew where the stairway was, and that's where all the kids' meetings were.
Okay, all right. So let me ask you this: hearing this conversation so far, here's a pastor that may watch this as it airs. What's the first step a church leader should take after hearing this conversation so far? What would you recommend?
I think first assess their own knowledge about security. If you don't know anything about security, take the time to learn a little bit. Watch some of these podcasts.
Absolutely.
Take the time to understand security yourself, or you won't even know what to ask or how to lead. And please don't just say, I'm going to ask somebody who used to be in the military or law enforcement to figure all of the security out and not know it yourself. So you have to educate yourself.
Yes, that's very well said. Very well said. Okay, now we're going to pivot. Now I'm going to give you a scenario. Okay. Are you ready, Ms. White?
I'm ready. Bring it on. Bring it on, sir.
Now this is going to be about a missed opportunity. Okay, here's a scenario. A church member reports concerning behavior about an individual who has become increasingly isolated and agitated. Leadership acknowledges the concern, but delays action. unsure if it's serious. Now, the question, what stands out to you immediately hearing that scenario?
Anytime I hear the word delay, it
Oh,
scares me, right?
yes.
And
Yes.
agitated. If I think that the most important thing about what we look for when somebody might commit a targeted violent act, targeted violence is a planned event.
Yeah,
It is
absolutely.
something that somebody moves on a trajectory towards violence. So they get an idea they're going to commit the violent act, and then they plan and prepare for it. And that planning and preparation is where you see that agitation, but it's also where you see somebody doing something like buying more firearms, or spending more time at the shooting range, or giving away their things, because 30 to 40% of people who commit a targeted violent act also take their own life. So they the signs that we'll see ahead of time are that. So that's one of the things that I think about when you say we delayed in it, because you might be delaying and giving that person an opportunity to take their own life, but also the lives of others.
Wow.
I want to add one more thing. It takes a lot. It takes a lot for somebody to speak up.
Yes.
Generally, people don't want to get involved. They want to think it is our nature to think the best of people.
Right.
And we don't want to get involved. And I always say to especially at the school level, I always say, snitching is getting somebody in trouble. Telling is getting somebody help. So in this case, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you.
No, you're fine.
I think that in this case, the person is saying something because they're concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ignore somebody being concerned about something.
Okay. And that's going to lead me to this next question. What are 3 steps churches should take when concerns are reported?
They should, first of all, they should have already had in place a proper place for that information to come to. In the school world, threat assessment teams, but not just in the school world, in an education, but also businesses and faith leaders should have some sort of threat assessment team. If you don't know what that is, look it up. But there's 3 chapters of it in my book that tells you what, you don't have to you don't have to get it in my book. My book's available at the library, right? Make sure that you know what you're looking for, and then that it's consistently reported to somebody. So who are concerns reported to? Because if Mary Jo in the front office at church gets a comment about Billy, who's a concern, and then the pastor gets a comment about Billy, but never talks to Mary Jo, that information doesn't come together. You need to have a place where all information can come to. So that's the biggest thing. Have a place where all the information can come to. Respond to everything quickly. The biggest complaint about threat assessments and concerns where people come forward and say, well, I told them about it, is that nothing was done. This perception that nothing was done when I did raise a concern. And then always recognize that the police can only do certain things.
Right.
The people who are going to see things are not going to be the police. We know that statistically. FBI data tells us that 25% of the time law enforcement may be aware of the individual and may be aware of concerns, but that 75 to 80% of the time, peers, family members, spouses, workmates, 70 to 80% of the time have specific information of concern about a potential threat. So school-age children, it's even worse. 92% is what our FBI data shows. 92% of the time, children were told somebody in their school, right?
Yes.
So you have to create an environment where people can share information. You have to respond quickly, and then you have to take that information. You have to take that environment that you're going to create and make sure that everybody knows about it before they have to find somebody to call.
Yes. And from what you're telling me too, there has to be a sense of comfort and trust with reporting that information, and possibly even confidentiality has to come into the mix as well too.
Sure.
So because a lot of people don't want to report stuff because they don't want it known that they reported it. So,
right.
So yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So
and my answer to that is report it anywhere. If you don't want to report it, to your pastor, if you tell the pastor should say, if you don't want to report it to me because you're concerned about that, call the FBI's anonymous tip line and
Yes.
tell them to pass it
It's a
to me.
great idea.
I'll have
That's a
no
great
idea
idea.
where it came from, right?
That's a great
1-800
idea.
tips, call the FBI's a tip line, right? And they will, and the FBI tip line people will take it, triage it, and call the local police, who will come to talk to you and say, the FBI got this call. It came to us from we don't know where, but they've requested anonymity, but there's a person that lives at this address that is doing this or saying this, and the people who reported it are concerned.
Yes. Okay. That's good. That's good. Okay. Now we're going to pivot into the closing segment here, and we're going to talk about hope, responsibility, and the path forward. Okay. So I'm going to give you I'm going to give you a reflection question. Okay, Ms. White. Okay. After all your work in this field, what gives you hope about prevention?
Because I've seen the progress. When I first started, I was working, as you would expect anybody in any agent. I was working espionage and counterintelligence cases and things like that, and cyber cases in the FBI. And then I got asked after the Sandy Hook Elementary School, I got told, hey, you're doing this now. And I began to work. I was assigned to work with the Vice President Biden's office, and a couple of other leadership people in the Washington, D.C. to look for answers. And I'll tell you some of the things that we did since that Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. This is why I feel hopeful. We completely changed. I was the only person on that team that was working in law enforcement. Wow. So it was my responsibility, I felt, to commit to creating a better plan for law enforcement. And we completely retrained more like 1 million law enforcement officers in the United States, from 18,000 law enforcement agencies, to go directly to the threat when there is a problem in a shooting environment, and how to safely get there. And that has changed dramatically. Now, every law enforcement officer who hears about a shooting underway knows what to do, how to go, and most importantly, what the other officers are doing. When they join up at the scene, they're all trained the same way nationally. So that's part of it. But we also put into place the national run, hide, fight concept. That didn't exist before. It was developed by the city of Houston. I called the mayor's office and said, we're going to push this out nationally. And they said, have at it. And so we pushed out run, hide, fight in schools and universities. I think that's one thing that I guess I would leave with this about that. The faith leaders may say, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. But everybody coming into your pews deals with it in drills at school or in drills at their offices.
That's true. True.
So they are not, it's naive to think that people aren't having these discussions in other places. So learn from them what they still need to know.
Okay. So basically you're saying there must be a mindset shift on the part of the church leaders. So how can they move forward without fear, Ms. White?
They're faith leaders. They should be able to do that.
All right.
I have always, since a young age, believed that, God never puts me in a situation that the Spirit won't keep me careful and safe in.
All right. That's true. That's well said. So now, if you could leave church leaders with one message, what would it be?
Lead them in security, just like you lead them towards God. I think it's equally important. If you had an epidemic of other horrible things going on in your community, abuse against children, or fraud against your senior community, you would want to look for the experts who could help you lead your community and take care of them. Don't let something as simple as security, the chance that you're going to have an incident at your church during a service is so minuscule. But just like a fire or a tornado, being prepared is your sense of responsibility. It's your responsibility. So lead them into that responsibility, because there are plenty of people who are afraid. And what takes fear away? Faith and knowledge.
All right. That's perfect right there. I don't want to say anything to even touch that. That was perfect. So stick around real quick. I just want to do one announcement and then I'll get you out of here, okay? So,
Lovely.
Ms. White, conversations like what you and I just have are exactly why we spent this season bringing together leaders from multiple disciplines, from physical security, cybersecurity, emergency management, and now violence prevention. Because protecting the church requires more than one perspective. It requires leadership alignment. So that's why we're going to be launching the Faith Secure National Church Security Leadership Forum. This forum, we're going to bring together experts from across all these fields that I mentioned to help pastors and church leaders understand how to protect their people while still preserving their mission, which is outreach. We'll be focusing on leadership responsibilities, structure, preparedness, and practical implementation. And I just want to end on this note that the future of church security is not fear-driven, it's leadership-driven. It's community-driven, and it's preparation-driven. Ms. White, I want to thank you for spending time with us and joining us on the Faith Secure podcast. You did an outstanding job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. And I want to thank you, the viewers, who joined us on this podcast. And if you would like more information on church security consultation, please connect with us directly at mdbconsultingagency.com/Faith Secure. Until the next episode, remember to stay watchful, prayerful, and prepared. God bless.